So how is one then accept this duality of life beyond, as I said, attachment towards feeling love all the time or feeling excitement all the time, and be able to accept and trust in this process of life,
Yeah.
and be able to be excited by the challenges, by all the things that come our way, because this experience of life will bring all different types of emotions towards us.
For sure. I mean, the first thing I often, as an expression that comes to mind in response to your question, I said, most people just want to feel better. And I'm always saying, no, you just want to get better at feeling. Rather than trying to feel better, just get better at feeling. Right? And so to me, it really speaks to the ability to become an expanded enough human being that you can make space for all of it, because it's all there regardless. You can't not have the feelings, we're sentient beings. It's just the degree to which we've been conditioned through life, through childhood predominantly, to repress certain feelings. They're not good, they're not appropriate. Boys don't cry, be quiet, go to your room. And there's this sort of over time, and it happens progressively, and it becomes accumulative, and so it becomes even more in depth usually by the time you get into your teens and then your 20s, and before you know it, you're in a relationship in your 30s, and you don't even know how to express a feeling anymore because you've learned to numb that part of you. And so it is sadly part of the societal conditioning that we all go through. And so I think it's the undoing of that. Like you've heard me say, I don't solve problems, I dissolve them. So it's the dissolution of the obstacles that are the impediment to the way that we naturally want to feel. And I've had so many experiences of that myself, where I can remember particularly, I was in London, it was when I was doing body transformations for these actors. We were shooting a big film in London with Stanley Kubrick, which was a cool experience. And so I reconnected with some of my friends from college, from university. And one of the girlfriends of mine, we were at a bar. There's about 5 of us just at a pub, British pub. And she got a phone call. And she was talking for a minute, and then she just started to bawl her eyes out. And her face kind of went a bit pale, and she kind of said bits and pieces, hung up, and then she shared with us that her grandfather had just died. And I knew her very well, and her dad was beautiful, but maybe not the most emotionally available or self-expressed. And yet she clearly, as is often the case, a grandchild with a grandparent, they have this there's a much more loving bond there, right? And so she was very close to her grandfather. And I can remember distinctly, and it might seem strange, but I was standing opposite, about as far as you are from me, and she was bawling her eyes out. And most human beings' reactions or responses to that is like comfort, and they're there, it's okay. And mine was jealousy. And not like a strong jealousy, but it was a beauty. There was a beauty in the depth of her capacity to feel. And it still gives me tingles right now just thinking about it, because it was so authentic, right? That she didn't take into account her surroundings with friends in a public space, in a pub, which could have easily, very quickly, through the processes of the mind, been like, okay, well, I'm not going to fully cry here. It was just gush, like unresisted, uninhibited self-expression. And that to me was one of the things that taught me to never hold back. Because an authentic feeling, and I make a subtle distinction, you're talking about emotions. And for me, feelings are natural. Emotions tend to be more associated with the ego or the identity. They're accumulated over time. So when someone gets emotional, you think like anger and frustration, even the depressions of the world. And I often say, emotions are feelings that have been accumulated over time. And so the more adept and proficient we get at being fully self-expressed in the moment, the difference between what I call a response versus a reaction. As a response is a very present state feeling. Like I'm responding, responsible for the moment. Whereas a reaction is something that it's a reaction. So you talking about your partner, Mimi, and to what degree did those feelings that came up really were emotions that were somewhat maybe still stuck from perhaps not fully processing the passing of your father. So this, for me, is the beauty of relationships, is because when people get triggered, as is often the case, or certainly a term that people use, it's really, these are emotions that have never seen the light of day, because they were feelings that whatever the circumstance was at the time, you didn't feel safe enough to express, you didn't know how to express, you thought that it was, in an inappropriate environment to express. And so the old adage of the body keeps score, I think is an actual book now, right? They still sit there until such time that there's a bigger catalyst that creates an emotion, which is really sort of the accumulation of, sort of, instead of having one feeling, now you've got 25 feelings that have been sitting there collecting until such time that the bucket spills over. And so I think, a long-winded answer to your question, but I feel like that's a practice. It's just something that takes a while for somebody to become sufficiently comfortable in their own skin, which goes back to what I was saying earlier about real self-love, is that I'm human, and hopefully, by virtue of being human, I'm doing the best I can. I'm not a bad person. I don't wish ill on anyone. I'm not trying to control or manipulate the world as some people seem to be. But if you're just you, and you honor yourself, you respect your own being, your own wellness, your own vitality, then it really is a form of responsibility to express yourself authentically at all times. And certainly if you want to have powerful relationships. I can remember a very big sports athlete went through a pretty public separation. And I was working with some of the colleagues, and he said, how would you help them if they were to reconcile the relationship? And I said, well, by first of all saying they didn't have a relationship. He's like, well, what do you mean? They've been married for X amount of years. I said, yeah, but they clearly didn't have a relationship if what he was cheating. If that was going on, there's a lie. And if ever there's an inauthenticity or there's a pretense between people, then you're not actually related. And so if somebody's committed to relating to life properly, fully, romantically, familial, friends, professionally, then you have to commit to being fully honest. Otherwise, you don't have a relationship. It's subtle, and humans do it so regularly that they think lying is okay or it's normalized. But it's the obstacle to fully embodying what it is to relate to anyone and life itself. That's why nature's so powerful. Like, nature doesn't have a pretense. It doesn't lie. It's just, this is it. There's violence with animals being torn apart by other animals. And it's like, there's no P's and Q's and politeness. It's just like, whatever has to happen, happen. And so obviously as humans, we become conditioned in the airs and graces and the way that we feel we're supposed to behave, the sort of the fitting in, the belonging, the way that people are so preoccupied with how they occur to other people or how they appear. And before you know it, it's like, there's a great line in V for Vendetta where Stephen Fry says, you wear a mask for so long, you forget who you are. And there's such a lot of truth in that.
I love it. One of my last questions, our company is called Intelligent Change, so is this podcast. As you said, that ability to be able to take off the mask.
Yeah.
And so many of us are wearing the mask, and we may not even know that we're wearing the mask.
Yeah.
However, let's say someone's watching or listening to this right now, and they have an inkling of, oh, like this speaks to me, or I may want to start this transformation journey or this intelligent change journey towards showing up of that person that I've hid behind the mask or I've buried because the way I was raised or the environment, whatever it may be, that have, in a way, took them down this path towards putting on this mask to help them either get that love or acceptance that they think they're getting by showing up in this different way. So what would be your recommendation towards somebody listening or watching right now to really begin this journey of getting real and authentic with themselves and creating a transformation to live life fully in line with their own self? Because I think we all feel our best when when we don't have to wear a mask, when we're able to just show up as ourselves and be like, hey, I'm just figuring it out, and accept ourselves and have that self-love. But where can one begin that journey?
It's such a beautiful question, and I would say and argue it's actually the biggest opportunity, but simultaneously the biggest obstacle for a human being, which is lying. So, meaning we learn to lie as a form of protection. So, you're a father, and so at some point, I'm sure you've recognized that your daughter lied about something. And those lies become increasingly insidious as we get older, and especially as we get more intelligent, to the point that we are lying to ourselves and we've bamboozled ourselves that we've forgotten. And so the opportunity to live a powerful, beautiful, full life is find out where you're lying. Because lies are always commensurate with fear. And the antithesis of fear is love and freedom. So to live the most extraordinary life is to live in the absence of fear, or at least to embrace fear and be authentic about it. You know, you could get up on stage and say, I'm really nervous right now, right? So fear can be present, but at least you're being fully transparent about it. So there's no lie, versus we've seen people get up on stage and they obviously want to do a good job, you know, but you can tell they're nervous or they're hiding something. So therein lies the rub, right? Because anybody who is, by virtue of listening to this and your invitation for them to like step into a more fully self-expressed, beautiful, passionate life, is to see where you're lying. But if you're lying, then it shows where you're scared. And where you're scared is the last place you want to go. But therein lies the opportunity. You know, what is Joseph Campbell's quote? Like, you know, the treasure you seek lies within the cave that you dare not enter, or something like that. And so it's really that simple. You want to live a powerful life. Where are you lying? In your workplace, you know, pretending that you enjoy it, going through the motions, you know, the post-it notepads that you're stealing from the office, but you justify because who cares? It's a $100 million company. The person at the cash register gave you, you know, $1 too much change, but you didn't say anything, which was really speaking to the scarcity that someone's living in. Like, again, we can have compassion, but it's a lie. And so really the access to living the most extraordinary life based in love and freedom is to be honest about where you're not being honest, which is easier said than done, but it's so beautiful when you can. I mean, right now, as hard as it is to say, I guarantee you there are listeners right now who are cheating in their relationship. And even as I say those words, they're like, oh shit, I've been found out, right? There's this shudder of guilt and shame that might go through somebody's body. And I can have compassion. It's not something I've ever done, but I've helped people. But the opportunity is for them to see that they don't have a relationship with either person, and therefore they don't have a relationship with themselves. And the opportunity is to come clean. It's one of my favorite quotes. They say, what interests me is the truth, however uncomfortable it makes you feel, because lying's boring. Everybody does that. So, but not easy. But if you want to live a powerful life, and for those who don't see beyond what they might consider the moralistic component of my answer, it speaks to every arena of life. Because if you're not fully related in your relationships themselves, then you're not fully related to life, and therefore you can't access things like vitality with your body, financial abundance in your, you know, careers, because you're disconnected. You know, you've got this facade. And so even if people don't feel like the pull or the inspiration to actually come clean with a partner or a co-worker or a family member who they did wrong many years ago, then look at it for the opportunity to become a much more powerful human being in the way that you can start to manifest and create the life you want. Because that's the only way to live an extraordinary life, is to come clean and to be honest and fully truthful in every arena of your life.